Welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast, the number one source for news, analysis, and discussion on the Detroit Red Wings, the NHL, and all things hockey. Here are your hosts, Ryan Hanna, Brad Crisco, and Evan Lopsinger.
Feels weird. Weather is way too nice, vibes are way too good outside, and the hockey vibes are just completely out of line.
No, it's March. They're very much in line to what we're used to.
But I go outside, I'm like, I feel great. The sun is here. So long seasonal affective disorder. Everyone's happy. And then you remember the playoff race in the Red Wings and the way the end of the season is going. You're like, oh, that has like January, ugly gray sky, cold written all over it.
Okay, a couple things. You're a Red Wings fan, so you're used to the fake hope we get every January and February, and you're used to the fake spring we get every March. I don't even need to look at my weather app to tell you it's going to snow next week.
Oh, everyone knows about fake spring. But I think real spring is probably on the way for the Red Wings. Unfortunately, again, love to be wrong, but yeah, last night felt a little bit dagger-y. It wasn't a dagger, but it felt dagger-y.
It's out of the, what's the word, sheath?
Yes.
Sharpening the knives.
It definitely feels shivvy around us. All right, folks. Welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast, here to talk to you about all things Detroit Red Wings hockey, the world of the NHL, the NHL draft, as we're talking about prospects now, and lots more. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan Hanna.
I'm Brad Crisco.
I'm Evan.
On this episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast, we are going to talk to you about Detroit's game against Washington and the other relevant games that happened. Didn't go as planned, even though it seemed like it might to start the night. We're going to be talking about takeaways from that game, what this means for the Red Wings and their already slim playoff hopes, what the chances are, what we might be able to look forward to for the rest of the season, and more. More stats on Marco Kasper, because we like doing that, because that's a silver lining right now. And Trey Augustine getting accolades down in the NCAA with Michigan State. Then we're going to move on to prospect profiles. Matthew Schaefer is not consensus, but probably the closest to a consensus number one ranked prospect this year. And we're going to be getting into that left shot defenseman before some NHL news and more. Before all that, I want to let you know that Wings Money on the Board is a campaign that we started in partnership with Prashant Iyer to raise money for the Jamie Daniels Foundation. The way it works is you make a pledge based on anything that can happen on the ice for a Red Wings game. You know, Dylan Larkin goals over the course of a season, times Simon Edvinsson punches someone in the face, Alex DeBrincat goals, Patrick Kane assists, whatever it might be. You make a pledge, any dollar amount, and then when you make that pledge and you make that donation through our portal, 100% of the proceeds go to the Jamie Daniels Foundation. And you're entered into giveaways for things like jerseys, tickets, swag packs, all of that and lots more. Our good friend Prashant Iyer has committed a $10,000 match. So we want to hit that match all in support of the Jamie Daniels Foundation. So go to wingedwheelpodcast.com/wings, MOTB to find out more. Also, if you want to support the Winged Wheel Podcast, patreon.com/wingedwheelpodcast. You get access to bonus overtime episodes, the Patreon exclusive Discord, and you're automatically entered into all of our giveaways. We give away 2 tickets to every Detroit Red Wings home game going directly to our Patreon supporters. So again, patreon.com/winged wheel podcast. Detroit goes into Washington. It was not the start of their tough schedule, but you know, they are now looking down the very, 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 very long barrel of a tough schedule. Washington was the first of 4 straight road games, 3 of them against top teams, 1 of them against a Utah team that just beat them and is competing for their own playoff spot. So you're seeing this and you're saying, it doesn't matter how justifiable these games are to lose. You need to start taking these points. Going into the third period, 1-1, you had some hope. And in a familiar story, Washington runs away with it in the third, 4-1. Your thoughts?
The mental fragility of this team might be my biggest concern around them. We make the jokes about, not jokes, because you can look at the stats and the standings to back it up. Every March, when they're anywhere near a playoff spot, they've collapsed the last 3 or 4 years like clockwork. And there was the game against Washington not that long ago where as soon as it went off the rails, it really went off the rails. Was not nearly that bad this time around, but kind of the same thing once that 2-1 goal went in. And we've seen games like that, countless games like that over the last few years. And every season by like January or February, they have that hot streak. We get fooled into thinking they're over it. And then the same old habits creep back in. And this team just has this vibe of when things run hot, they can ride it. But as soon as they get a little bit of adversity, they find a way to turn it into a lot of bit of adversity. And you can look at that at a macro scale. You can look at it at a micro scale. It works both ways. And I don't know what to pinpoint that on. Normally, we were probably, now looking back at it, unfairly putting that on Lalonde, that he has problems with keeping this team consistent, motivated, disciplined, whatever you want to call it. Same thing's starting to happen under McLellan. So now I'm looking at the leadership group. Like, how does this keep happening? Because the core group of leaders, you can pick whoever you want to classify as a leader. It's 4 years in a row of the same thing over and over and over again. And obviously you look at certain guys and you go, no, you can see the effort. Like, as much as in a scenario where I'm blaming the leadership group, kind of hard to lump Larkin into that, because you can see that guy willing to run through a wall every night, hurt, tired, sore, whatever. But man, you got to wonder why it keeps happening.
The point you made about, unfairly blaming it on Lalonde, maybe, but isn't there an argument to be made also that Lalonde couldn't coach them out of that? And McLellan, we say a lot, yeah, he's come in and he's changed his team in a lot of ways, but it's not really his team until he's had a full off-season, training camp, time with them, time with the young guys. You don't have a lot of practice time in the NHL once the season is going, especially a year where you had a longer, it was a very short tournament, but the break there, it's hard to get in that time with the guys and use any of the downtime to really coach those things in. So yeah, I agree. It's on the players to learn how to be a winning team. And a lot of that is mental, the ability to build up that mental wall, be a brick wall mentally and not fall apart completely when adversity comes. But how are they going to do that until they get to the playoffs, for example? So I think, I'm not trying to take a dig at Lalonde or say it's his fault, but I also think there's something to be said about this could also change with the coaching with some time here.
Well, it depends on what time scale you want to talk about. If you talk about this in relation to the playoff race, yeah, they've only been good enough since Lalonde took over to have this conversation in relation to a playoff race. But this has been an issue for 10 years. It feels like we talk about this constantly in the entire history of our podcast. Now, we usually just chalk that up to, and probably rightfully so, the team being awful.
Yeah.
Just talent-wise pre-Lalonde. So you can make the argument wherever you want to draw that line, right? And obviously there's been so much turnover in the team that, yeah, when Lalonde got here is probably the fair place to start that conversation. And yes, McLellan has not been here that long, and this is the first true adversity they have faced under him. Not a glowing start, but yeah, you could be right. There's probably something to the, okay, well, he's only had them through good times. This is his first time trying to pull them out of a tailspin. Let's see how he does. And yeah, time will tell, but by the end of the season, it's not a huge sample size, but 4 months isn't nothing.
You guys say adversity. My thoughts are, is this team actually any good?
Yeah.
Well,
is it adversity because they just don't have the talent to be a playoff team? That's, you talk about adversity, you talk about, Washington, for example. They could never get through Pittsburgh, and then they finally do and they win. But they were a true cup contending team. They had the talent there to win. They just had adversity. Maybe the adversity we're talking about is the lack of true playoff talent.
That part's obvious. I think everybody, even the most staunch Red Wings supporter, will be like, no, this is a very flawed team. What I'm pointing to more specifically is the third period problems that have plagued this team for multiple years and the inevitable, again, I know it's just a coincidence, but the yearly December and March tailspins, especially the March one where it's like, okay, you did a great job of getting here. And we can say what we want about the lack of talent of this team. And believe me, I think we're a couple years into this team overperforming expectations. But they were comfortably in the number one wild card spot a month ago. Like, not even.
Comfortable is a word.
Comfortable, but like, they were
last
They
year.
controlled their destiny.
They weren't in there because of like extra games played or anything like that.
Yeah.
It was their spot, whether you wanted to look at it by points percentage or points. They had played well enough over the balance of the season to hold a playoff spot. And now, for the second year in a row where they were in a playoff spot, I mean, look at last year. They were 6, 7, 8 points clear of ninth place when we had that hilarious meme episode last year.
Was I there?
No.
Okay, good.
And you look at that, and then this year, again, not as big of a gap, but the same garbage. So we can say what we want to tell them, but they got to where they needed to be and then pissed it away. And that's 2 years in a row where they were in the playoffs, 3 years where they were at least competitive, and the same things happened.
So here's where I'm going to annoy you again. And we're borrowing from, I was going to get to this right after the game recap, so we'll do the game recap in a second. But what I'm going to say that's going to annoy you is I think Evan's point still stands here, though, because I think good teams, it's a long season, and you can complain as much as you want about the season being 82 games long. God knows I do, but it's a long season, and it's one thing to be good and be able to win games, and it's another thing to be good and win games when you're gassed, when you're injured, when you lost someone at the deadline, or someone has a season-ending injury and it shakes up the entire house of cards that your team is built on. Good teams and talented teams are able to win in December, which is probably the first point of attrition where teams start to feel the grind of the season. And then again in March, where guys who are checked out are really checked out. They're thinking about Pebble Beach more than anything else if they're not on a playoff team. And guys who are injured are really worn down. And so I think Brad and Evan, you're both exactly right. And I think as most things go, the boring answer here is that it's 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. Like, you do need to be a better team, and better talent will allow you to persevere in March, because Andrew Kopp is a good player for the Red Wings, and he was, but Andrew Kopp shouldn't be such a crucial player where you're 2-8 in your last 10. And his season-ending injury means you are never going to have the kind of forward configuration that you did before. So when you have better talent down the lineup, Andrew Kopp's loss will hurt you, but it shouldn't kill you. And Brad, you're right. You have to mentally learn as a team how to win, a 2-1 goal happens. Todd McLellan said after the game, and I couldn't agree more, that thing happens sometimes. Whether you want to blame any of those goals, that one shouldn't have got in, or that guy got burned, or is that turnover, it happens. You have a whole period to make up for it. And it's not just that the guys give up. I don't want to mischaracterize it as these players are giving up. I think they just get too worked up about being down, and it forces mistakes, turnovers, loss of positioning. They're aimless offensively. They're not skating in the direction. It's as simple as they're not skating in the direction they should be to anticipate the play. Like, all of their coaching and their systems and everything kind of just falls apart. And I think you can't attribute that. It's not binary. You can't attribute it to just talent or just coaching. It's a mixture of everything.
Well, we always make the fire drill joke in reference to The Office, where they think there's a fire, time for the fire drill, and everybody panics and nothing goes according to plan. That's the Red Wings in these situations. Everybody wants to survive, but they're not doing a good job of it. And the only counterpoint I would make with a little bit of pushback to this fall off happens because of the talent on the team. And don't get me wrong, I agree in the large picture. This is a 10th, 11th place team just on talent. This is where they should be. I'm just more so arguing the semantics of how they get here. But 3 of the teams that have passed them in this fall are the Montreal Canadiens, Columbus Blue Jackets, and New York Islanders. 3 teams that are also very not talented on paper.
Well, Columbus has fallen back down now. Same time as the Red Wings started to lose, a little bit delayed, but they've started to lose too, and a lot of the same narratives are going on there. I understand. Okay, very quickly, the way the game went is I think Detroit started out slow. They weren't necessarily playing their best. I think they were fortunate for it to only be 1-0, and then Dylan Larkin, 12:28 out in the first, scores. He was in the right place after bench shot, makes a great play to enter the zone, get the puck on net. Larkin's there to bury the rebound. Larkin's 28th I think they play a great second period. They really find their legs in their game, and they play the kind of game where I'm like, that was solid. Like, that was really excellent. And in the third, it was the 2-1 goal happened, and like we've been talking about, Detroit it felt like they felt the game was lost. And then it became 3-1 and then 4-1. And you know what? I think Mrazek, up until that point, he's the reason he kept him in the game. When Washington was dominating earlier, I thought Mrazek played really well. I don't think this is a goalie loss or anything like that. I think it's just they lost to a better team. They didn't play. It's not the same third period as the other Washington game. The results were the same, but it's not like they completely imploded to that degree, but the results were the exact same.
I think actually circling back to the point we were talking about just before, coupled with this game, and I think it was Prashant in one of our group chats posted the Red Wings expected goals over the last 5 games, a stretch in which they're 2-3, and they were comfortably in the positives all 5 of those games.
They haven't been terrible.
No, but that's to the point of they have the capability to do it. And again, to your point, yeah, they were playing the second period, especially, they were excellent. And then that one goal, and it's all off the rails.
Again, and this is a massive oversimplification of the analytics we're talking about here, so don't dig too much into it. I think some of this may be led to the system that McLellan has brought in, which is you're not going to be able to maximize the high danger chances. You just don't have the kind of offensive talent down the lineup for that, but you pepper them with shots. You make sure you're not passing up opportunities. So in terms of cumulative stats and things like that.
But it was expected goals, not like Corsi or something like that, right? So it's not I understand it's a flawed stat, and how things are calculated and how things are accumulated is not going to be ideal. But just to the broad point of they are, for the most part, controlling play, even against these good teams. They just can't get it done in the end, which, again, to argue myself, well, yeah, they're not capitalizing on a lot of these chances because they don't have the talent to outside of a handful of players.
It's hard to sell that the Red Wings have actually been decent, but where I stop short of like buying into the doom, and it sucks to lose in March. Like, it means you're not going to see much of April, so I'm fully there. But where I stop short is, this is the exact same as they were at the beginning of the season. And I think there's a lot of similarities that have to be worked on in the offseason through coaching and roster turnover. But I think there are a lot of differences as well. And you look at the underlyings, and that's what you see, because those expected goal numbers were not the same earlier in the year. We were talking about, hey, how sustainable is it winning with a 45 expected goal share percentage? You can't rely on goalies all year. And that script is flipped. The team is actually improved, even though not enough.
I actually think right now is the inverse of what was happening at the start of the year. We had the conversation multiple times about this team has 10 points, or they played 11 games. They've maybe deserved to win 2. Whereas now it's, the team generates some offense. They just can't find a way to win.
I think what it all boils down to, and I'm repeating what I was said just earlier here, but I keep thinking about this, and I can never land on one solution to what's going on. I agree with you, Evan. I think that it's absolutely different than what it was at the start of the year. And I think this team can be playing better right now. I think we've seen, Brad's right, that we've seen them play better earlier, and it's part of the mental fragility that they are flip-flopping on that so much. But oftentimes I'm like, this just kind of is. It's either the limitations of the team, like you're going to have to go out there and play that third pair that you have to as much as you do, or that third line as much as you do. You're going to get beat, especially when you don't have the luxury of playing bad teams at this point in the schedule. We talked to you guys on recent episodes. Boston is the only game that they may be favored to win by Vegas odds for the rest of the year. Could be it, right? So it's...
Would you feel different about the makeup of the Detroit Red Wings if they had the easiest strength of schedule right now?
I wouldn't feel different about the makeup. I'd feel different about their chances. Because as of right now, let's do the standings update. As of right now, Detroit is 3 points out of the second wildcard spot with one more game played. They have 14 games left. That is not a dagger. They are fully in it. The problem is there are 3 teams between them and the second wildcard spot. And their strength of schedule is ridiculous. On average, they're playing a divisional playoff team.
Well, to put it into context, I saw 2 separate projections today that ranked the playoffs odds, and they were 5% and 7%. So yes, It is only
6%.
So it is only 3 points out, and with one extra game played. But like Ryan mentioned, they have to outpace 4 teams to do that. Which what were we saying before the episode? Just to get to 90 points, they got to go 10 wins in their final 14 games. So they have to upset 9 teams to get in the playoffs.
It's a 714 points percentage,
which would put them at like 100,
which
plus
would
points
be
by a
the
lot.
second best team in the NHL right now. Second only to, I don't know if this is irony or just a kick in the face by the universe, the Washington Capitals.
It has a funny way of working out like that a lot of the time. But yeah, you never say never. We all remember the Hamburglar Senators who had like a fraction of a percent to make the playoffs, and they went on a run and did it. Hell, the Tigers this year were that team. It's always possible. And you don't say you're dead till the fat lady sings, but man, the curtain's closing. We're definitely getting there.
Like, I'm not sitting here, Evan, trying to say, oh, this team's actually been good enough to be a playoff team. I think they have, as Brad mentioned, they have a lot of flaws still, and this team is the team, and it's fun when they were able to find a way to win, and I think that team is still there, but not to the tune of 10 of 14 against these great teams they're playing down the stretch. I think they are good enough to say they are one of the 6 teams that's competing for a wild card spot this year on paper. Absolutely. And I also think they are bad enough where when they go up against an average opponent of 612 or 610 points percentage, where I'm like, yeah, they're not really good enough where I can expect them to take 10 of 14. You can never expect any team in the NHL to take 10 of 14 consistently, but certainly not this team at this point in the season with the injuries and the changes they've had this year versus those opponents. Like, it's just not, it would be very unlikely.
The silver lining, they have a top 10 draft pick right now.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to talk about right now. Let's actually do the full standings update. So with that loss, Detroit last night, they moved down the order. They got passed by the New York Islanders. They very briefly were ahead of the Columbus Blue Jackets as well, but Detroit is now in the wild card order. You have Ottawa and Montreal in the wild card spots, 77 and 73 points respectively. And then you have the Rangers with 72 points. They have 69 games played. 69 games played.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were stopping for another reason. Nice.
Are you okay? Are you sick too?
No, I heard our 4th guest, so I thought
that's
we were
right.
stopping. Yeah.
Yeah, the Fast and Furious in the background.
Yeah.
Oh, boy. Then you have the New York Islanders, who a lot of people had them down and out, but you looked at the standings and they just needed one good night, and that's what they got last night. 70 points in 67 games played. Columbus, same, 70 points in 67. And Detroit, 68 games played, 70 points. So Detroit's not out of it, but they are going to need a lot of favorable nights, things they don't control, and they're going to have to take points off teams where they are not going to be favored. And they have 3 on the road upcoming now, and I believe 9 games total for the rest of the season on the road. They have Vegas, Utah, Colorado on the road. And then, you have St. Louis, Montreal, Florida, Tampa, New Jersey, Toronto on the road with various other games mixed in there.
You kind of hope that some of those teams rest players, but with how tight the lead for the Atlantic is, Florida, Toronto, Tampa are not sitting guys, because getting first in the Atlantic improves your odds of winning that series significantly. So that's another nail going into the coffin for the Red Wings.
I was going to bring up the same point. You look around the whole league, and the only team that has such a comfortable lead that games at this point probably don't matter to them a whole lot is Washington. Every other division is a tight race, and then there's Washington, who just took 4 points from Detroit in the last little while, which, that's unfortunate.
So Detroit right now is 23rd in the league. I'm looking as far down as they have 70 points. I'm looking as far down as teams who have 65 points. If everything goes terrible for Detroit and everything goes great for them, it won't happen. But Detroit could have, top 8 lottery odds at this point. And I know people are going to be saying tank. You can't tank. Like, you can shut down Larkin if he's hurt, or you can, play rookies, or maybe you get the Nate Danielson experience and whatever that might be. But
well, I know people are going to ask the question, so let's ask the question. When's your, all right, let's start seeing a Danielson or a Gylander, like the point of, we know these games don't matter too much. It's time to start, prepping for the future a little more, like giving Danielson a trial, Gylander a trial, maybe giving Cossa a couple games. How far away from that are you?
I'm not more than a week away, but you also have to consider what does the AHL team need as well, because it's not been a clear road for them since the year turned, right? Like they've had a rocky road there, and they're going to want to keep things consistent. So do you do like
I think
a couple games here and there, but
I think if they lose 2 of their next 4, my mindset on this season shifts. I'm still very clearly in it's only 3 points, go for it. I understand the odds of it all, but like you're right there. You at least have to give it a go. But if they have another 4 to 6 game stretch of no better than 500, that's probably the dagger's out, sun sheathed, the forward momentum is there. You just kind of got to accept your fate. But thankfully, we're at least mid-March, and I'm not fully out of it yet, which compared to the lifetime of this podcast, I'm still grateful for.
Yeah. I mean, we all know what this is, right? Like, we're not delusional. It's very unlikely. This isn't exactly a team playing like they're going to make the playoffs right now based on the opponents that they have. But, there's been years where you're 20 points out of it at this point. So if you're 3, you're not going to call it early. And or at the very least, you're not going to expect the team to call it early. So they'll need to go on another improbable, like 7-game, oh my God, what's happening run to change people's minds, though. Because everyone kind of sees the writing on the wall here.
They've done it twice this year. Why not a third?
Look at the opponents in those 2 runs.
If they pull off a 7-game heater against, some cup favorites, that would be some 2024-2025 Red Wings BS.
If they go on a 7-game heater to get into the playoffs against these opponents, not only will I be so thrilled they make the playoffs, they'll be on such a run. I'll be predicting they're taking out whoever they're playing in the first round. You cannot stop this train.
Evan won't be getting a Petr Mrazek jersey. He will be tattooing a Petr Mrazek jersey on his back.
I will not be doing that.
He will be doing that. We will knock him out with...
Does he do 43 Mrazek or vintage 34
I was just going to
Mrazek?
say, yeah, I'm not sure. Anyhow, those are the playoff odds, the playoff race. It is looking bleak for Detroit. They have Saturday against Vegas on the road, and we're going to be back with you on Sunday. Other Red Wings news. Let's go to some positive stuff. Trey Augustine. He is racking up the accolades in the NCAA. What a season with Michigan State. The Spartans, that program's turnaround has been fantastic to see. He is named the goalie of the year for Big Ten and is one of the finalists for the Mike Richter Award given annually to the top goalie in men's NCAA D1. So he is justifiably and deservedly so getting all those accolades. And the Red Wings are enjoying a spoil of riches in terms of their net-minding pipeline.
Hey, even though things are going off the rails this year, there's still lots of reasons for optimism.
Sebastian Cossa's never won Big Ten Goalie of the Year, so checkmate.
The thing I love about the Cossa-Augustine conversation is, and we've said this before, and I'll continue to say it, those are 2 very different goalies, physically speaking, and also in terms of their play style. And not that one is better than the other inherently, but you also kind of look at it and say, if you want to have an answer in net for a position that's very hard for teams to solve, it's good to kind of cover your bases. You're not doubling down on just the big athletic guy. You're not doubling down on a guy who isn't so big that he can't cover the whole net. You have Augustine, who is smaller, pie in the skies, that's your UC Saros. He's very kind of controlled, measured. And then you have Sebastian Cossa, who's colossal, athletic freak. I mean, the Red Wings are watching Petr Mrazek in net right now, so goalies traversing their crease or out of it isn't uncommon in the NHL anymore, but a guy where you're like, yeah, he has to just keep his own net, and that's what he's been working on, but by all rights, he has all the tools to be an unreal goalie in the NHL. So you have both kind of, if you're going to call it just 2 archetypes, you have both of them in the pipeline for the Red Wings.
I was actually thinking again about the day, hopefully, when they're both on the Red Wings, and I really think there's something to you can pick what goalie's starting on a given night based on your opponent. Like if they're playing Tampa, who loves to play an east-west game where the speed and athleticism will be really handy in net, you play Cossa. Whereas when you play like a Carolina who's just shoot from everywhere, but it's a lot of straight-on shots, the calm, composed goalie with, the probably better rebound control, more control of his crease is probably a benefit. You throw Augustine in for that game. I legitimately wonder if that's something we see down the line.
But if we're even having that conversation, Brad, that means everything has gone right for both goalies. You know what? That is a dream for any NHL team.
We need to have hope right now, Ryan.
If we get to pick what goalie we play against Carolina and Tampa, that means they're either fully in a rebuild and no one's left, or these two players have become Vezina caliber players.
At which point, Edmonton might be offering you Connor McDavid. Anyways, great for Trey Augustine. Excited to see more of him. And not to mention, Gylander and all these other players in the Red Wings pipeline and net. Like, it's really turned around. It's painful to say because it's March of 2025 and we're talking prospects again, but that part hasn't changed in terms of if you need a silver lining right now, that's where you look. While we're doing silver linings, I know FanDuel Sports put up the stat during last night's broadcast, and Prashant also posted as well. Marco Kasper has 11 goals since January 10th. We posted this on our socials too. And Prashant noted that's the same amount as Tom Wilson, Cole Caulfield, Sidney Crosby. Few good players there.
Seems good.
Few good players there. And he leads the Red Wings at 5-on-5 expected goals for percentage with 57.56. That's from Evolving Hockey at 20 years old. Like Marco Kasper, after the Four Nations break when the whole team kind of took a dip, you could see he was having some rookie struggles as well. But going back to our conversation from the last couple of episodes, if you want to draw a takeaway that matters for more than just the season, that is strong from this season, it's Marco Kasper's emergence.
Kasper's, Johansson's, Edvinsson's, hell, even Soderblom doesn't look out of place on the first line. Kasper's and Edvinsson are obviously the two shining stars and look like long-term solutions. But again, to take the optimistic view on the season as a whole, yeah, a lot of questions have been answered. He's playing with two not defensive stalwarts, and to still put up those percentages is insane. Kane and DeBrincat are going to help him generate the offense. And Kane and DeBrincat are a huge reason he has the statistical output he does. But you're not getting to 50% if your own defensive zone is a dumpster fire every time you go back there. And again, as much as we love Kane and DeBrincat, they're not doing the heavy load defensively. So that's a testament to Kasper there. While you were talking, I did have a thought in my head. Did you see Dylan Cousins' numbers in Ottawa?
Yeah.
It's shocking that everyone who leaves Buffalo is way better than what they were there.
If the rumors are to be believed that the Sabres wanted Kasper and then didn't end up pulling the trigger, to see what he's doing now after that all fell apart, and then to see what Cousins is doing in Ottawa, and just, I'm not saying Norris has been bad for them, but he hasn't been doing what these two are doing. That organization, man.
I think he got hurt the other night too.
He gets hurt every 3 games.
He got hurt since the start of this podcast. I still can't believe, again, it's not the end of the world, but they added the second to that trade. I'm like, the guy you're getting doesn't play. He doesn't play. Josh Norris is a great player. I'd love to play him on the ice someday.
I mean this genuinely. We make this joke a lot. But I mean this in the full, literal sense of that joke. The second this season ends for the Red Wings and the Sabres, you call them every single day. Peterka, Quinn, I don't care. Pick what young guy you think could be a reclamation project, because the second he leaves, he's going to be unreal.
Buffalo, and that's just a broken team. And then the Dahlin rumors got out and about him meeting with the GM, and it was a positive meeting, but he wanted to know where the team's going. Look, I understand it might have been a positive meeting and he was satisfied. Famously a good sign when your best players meeting with the GM to say, hey, are we going to be good ever, or do I need to go?
Yeah. If you have to ask what we're doing here, that's probably not a good sign either way, even if the conversation is productive.
What do you think the odds were? Dahlin went in for that meeting, walked out, looked at Terry in the hallway, and just went, no.
No, Terry's not there, man. Like, I'm actually surprised Kevin Adams is still there.
I
cannot believe it.
There's no way he makes it to the draft, right?
Well, then why would you give him the trade deadline? That to me, well, you don't know who's actually pulling the strings there either. So
Yeah.
All right. More on, well, actually, we're going to get into prospect profiles, but first, a word from the sponsors of the Winged Wheel podcast. Back after this. Eating healthy when you're busy is tough. Usually it's either bland meal prep or greasy fast food, the kind of thing that's turning Evan into a milk bag. But with Tempo, we don't have to choose. Their chef-crafted, dietitian-approved meals give us quick, delicious options without sacrificing nutrition. Our latest delivery from Tempo featured the filet mignon with creamy mushroom sauce and the spicy chipotle beef and sweet potato bowl. Both were incredible. The filet was tender and rich, while the chipotle beef had just the right kick. Best of all, they're ready in just 3 minutes, way faster than waiting for takeout. Tempo makes it easy to eat well and feel good, offering over 20 weekly options that fit different dietary needs, including protein-packed, calorie-conscious, and fiber-rich meals. And right now, you can try it at an incredible Winged Wheel podcast discount. For a limited time, Tempo is offering our listeners 60% off your first box. Go to tempomeals.com/wingedwheel. That's tempomeals.com/wingedwheel for 60% off your first box. tempomeals.com/wingedwheel. Rules and restrictions may apply. Welcome back. If we sound diluted before, we're about to sound even more diluted now because we're going to be talking about who is likely to go number 1 overall in the 2025 NHL entry draft, and that is Matthew Schaefer, left shot defenseman, OHL Erie Otters, a guy who we were hoping to see more of at the World Juniors before he crashed into the net, broke his clavicle, but still, by all rights, the top-rated player coming into not a disappointing, but just a very muddy top end of this draft where no one is really standing above the rest. Most people seem to pick Matthew Schaefer. So what makes him stand above Misa or Hagens or Martone or Frondel or other guys in everyone's minds? Why is he so highly touted?
Well, it's funny you say stand above because he doesn't, literally, compared to most of those guys. He's not a big defenseman. He's not like tiny either.
He's 6'1", 6'2",
yeah,
but he's slight. He's a 180.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure he's going to fill out and that's going to help. But the fact that those are his dimensions and he's still the presumptive favorite to go first overall, despite missing a good chunk of this season due to injuries, and I want to say there was a mono bout in there as well.
At the start of the year, yeah.
Is a testament to just how skilled he is. You hear the word smooth be thrown around defensemen a lot as a big compliment, and that's him to a T. Everything just looks so effortless for him, other than when he's on a breakaway and there's a crossbar in front of him. But yeah, his skating is excellent. His passing, his breakout's excellent. He can run a power play. He can run an O-zone. The hockey IQ is insanely high. The hands are good. The shot's not overpowering, but it's smart. Like he gets it through traffic. He's just that prototypical can do it all defenseman. There's no real downside to his game, assuming he fills out a little more as he gets older, which I think is a fairly safe bet. Yeah, he's just like a remarkable hockey player in the sense of just how well-rounded his game is at a high level, not even an above average level, a high level.
It's very hard to find defensemen at that age, especially in a league that the CHL, fantastic league, one of the best development leagues in the world, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't exactly hone the most physical or the most detailed parts of games, especially defensively. So when you find a guy that does it at both ends of the ice that well and doesn't have any serious flaws to his game, that's notable. Usually when you see defensemen and you're like their positioning or their gap control or in their own end leaves something to be desired, a lot of the times I look at that and I say in the modern NHL, you give them 200-300 reps, which is a lot of games, and you're talking nearly 4 seasons there, but that comes around for the guys who can do it, who have the hockey IQ to pick that up. But for guys who are showing you that they can, break apart plays before they even happen now, who can have that gap control, who can be trusted in high pressure situations, whether you're leading or trailing, that's a massive, massive, massive green flag. For him to be skating as well as he does, I agree with Brad. I don't think that the frame is necessarily anything to be concerned about because he'll fill out, and it's not held him back so far. So to me, the fact that Schaefer is so well-rounded all over the ice, you can look at any individual one of his abilities and say, that's why I'm sold on him. But to me, the total package and the fact that you can't really dig too many holes in his game. That's why I don't know if people are of the mind that defensemen are boring picks, but he's going to be an easy pick for whoever takes him.
Yeah, he's a lock-on top 5 pick for me. He has all the tools, and he's elite at them. His skating and his edge work is incredible. Stylistically, watching him play, he reminds me a lot of Miro Heiskanen, which gets a lot of GMs and fans excited.
Yeah, injured.
I said
Sorry,
stylistically.
yes. Sorry, Dallas fans. That wasn't nice.
They don't even know who we are, so it's okay.
That's good. Yeah, probably for the best. They have Jim Nill. That's all they need from the Red Wings world.
That's the last. Yeah, we won't go there. But yeah, I think the only thing that really gives you pause is the injury history, and availability is the best ability. That may hurt him. It may not. Like, all the viewings of him are remarkable. And I think for me, one of the biggest tells was how lost Team Canada was when he left that team. Not the Canadian junior team didn't have the best Canadians there. That's been, long debated and discussed. But when he went down with an injury, that team was completely lost without him. So he can be the straw that stirs the drink on any team, and he'll be a do-it-all top pair defenseman for sure if he can stay healthy and continues to develop, because he's got elite tools everywhere on the ice.
I'd have a hard time seeing him drop below 2, honestly.
I'd be shocked if he drops below 2. One, NHL GMs famously value defensemen over forwards. Maybe not centers, but it's debatable. This isn't a deep defense draft. Like, there's not a number 2 option there. It's not likely to happen because teams will reach for defensemen, like I was mentioning about the premium. But there's a reality. He goes first overall, and there's not another defenseman in the top 10. At least according to a lot of rankings, that's how it's shaking out right now. Again, it will.
I just never buy it.
It won't play out. Someone will reach for a defenseman. But it's actually the one thing, him being a defenseman, is what gives me pause about first overall, because historically, top 10 picks, forwards have been a lot safer in what they're projected to be versus what they actually become. There's been a bit more variance in the defensemen. Like, you look at just defensemen who have gone first overall. Is Matthew Schaefer going to be Rasmus Dahlin? Is he going to be Aaron Ekblad? Which is still a very good defenseman, but in a redraft, I don't think Ekblad's going top 5. And Owen Power, again, great player. First overall pick grade, I don't know.
You want to talk about gripes in Buffalo? Holy, do they give it to Owen Power?
Yeah, so it's like there's more variance with defensemen in the top 10, which would always worry me a little bit, but the variance does go the other way as well, where they end up being a lot better than you project, because that's the nature of the position.
Well, we can use Buffalo as an example, because they might be in the conversation to have this dilemma where there's a Matthew Schaefer sitting there, and there's a James Haggins or a Michael Misa. It's like, what do you see as your future cornerstone of your franchise? Like, I mean, should they take Matthew Schaefer based on how, if your plans were for Owen Power and Rasmus Dahlin to be your top 2 and, carry this team forward, maybe you look at a forward instead. Like, GMs do crazy stuff all the time. I don't really know if it's a bolt-on decision that just because the supply of defensemen is low, is he should go first overall.
One, I'm going to go down to this hypothetical, because Buffalo getting first overall would be fascinating for this reason. They have their left side of the D locked up long-term.
Yeah.
Dahlin, Power, Samuelsson. All under long-term contracts. 2 of them legitimately great players. And they have a boatload of small skilled forwards on the team and in the system. They are
taking Matthew Schaefer now that I think about it.
No. One, they should trade down is what they should do. But 2, if they keep the pick, like, there's no way they don't take Misa. Like, he's exactly what they're missing.
That's why they're going to take Matthew Schaefer.
I know they absolutely will not take Misa, because that's an organization that does nothing that makes sense. But I just had to get another dig in at Buffalo while the opportunity arose.
I don't think the decision on what to do at 1 or 2 is all that easy. I think it comes down to a lot of philosophical debate, and it'll come down to a lot of the interviews as well. But Matthew Schaefer certainly has the talent to be a first overall pick.
And from a Red Wings perspective, just to kind of round this out here, this is extremely unlikely. Like Detroit would have to keep falling down the standings, and then they would have to win a draft lottery for this to be in the conversation. So, I mean, Evan said last episode, it is extremely frustrating because this is a year where a lot of the guys in the top 5 would fill a direct need from the Red Wings, and a number 1 left shot defenseman.
Well, let's go window shopping then. Matthew Schaefer and Moritz Seider is your top pair defense for the next 10, 15 years. How does that make you feel?
Then you can have Simon Edvinsson and a random fan from the crowd every night.
Axel Sandin Pellikka.
Yeah, okay, we'll settle for that. That's pretty... You have one guy in there where you're worried about what size, that's it, with ASP, and he's also your power play quarterback.
So if the Red Wings are sitting at 1 and they have the pick of the draft, do they take Matthew Schaefer given their defensive prospects?
It'd be a very reasonable pick. I think you can make as strong an argument for him as you would for Misa. Actually, probably
even Hagens, I think, would still be it. For me, it's those 3. For me, I think on talent and all things and projectability and all things considered, Misa's still number 1 for me. I think based on what the Red Wings need and are lacking, Misa would still be number 1 for me. Because again, when you come down to team building, you have Seider, Edvinsson, ASP. And all of those guys eventually down the line are going to be making a boatload of money. And you have to allocate dollars and roles appropriately. So if you're paying a Matthew Schaefer $10 million and he's on your second pair, right?
There's only one defenseman on each power play unit.
Exactly. You've got Edvinsson, Seider, ASP, and in theory, Schaefer, who could all run a power play. 2 of them are now not going to play power play. Meanwhile, you look at the forwards, and yeah, don't get me wrong, Kasper's great, Larkin, Raymond, Danielson. There's a lot of question marks beyond that. I still think Detroit is in a position where a heavier premium needs to be paid at forward if the hockey gods finally bless us with a draft lottery win. This conversation does not apply at 10th overall because I don't think it's reasonable to expect a $9 million player at 10th overall. You hope, but I think it's an entirely different conversation at that point. But if they were in this position, I think the gap is too big that they still, all things being equal, lean to the forward.
That's Matthew Schaefer. That's some talk about the way things might shake out in the draft. I, again, can't expect that this is going to be terribly relevant for the Red Wings, but then again,
what if?
We'll see how these last 14 games go.
Let me tell you, if we're spending 2 months talking about Hagens versus Misa versus Schaefer every episode, I'm a very happy man.
Yeah, I would love that. That'd be great.
We're going to find out what elementary school they went to, what their thoughts on onions are, how much they love their grandparents.
Keep politics out of this, Brad.
Like, we're going to know everything about them in detail, and we'll be happy to do it.
All right. Let's get into some NHL news, most notably comments today from Gary Bettman coming out of the GM meetings and on the future of the NHL, what has happened in terms of proposed changes, things like that. Nothing groundbreaking, but just there's not a lot of specific moments where you get this kind of exposure to Bettman, so there's always kind of a meal made of it in terms of these are his thoughts on these things that weren't even discussed today. So one of them that I want to lead off with, and maybe not the most important in some people's mind, but he was asked about the 1-8 playoff seeding versus the kind of divisional system that we have right now. And I want to get ahead of this by saying I know that when you go to a 1-8 system, it doesn't necessarily produce wildly different matchups than what we see with the current system. The reason why I'm a proponent for it is the reseeding. I like 1-8 because I think the best team in the conference should play the worst team in the conference in terms of playoff teams. But that's not going to change things a lot. I still, because they already play the wildcard teams, for sure. It's the reseeding for me, because I think the best teams should play each other as late into the playoffs as possible. Now, the counter to that is, well, then they are more injured. So if you get Colorado Dallas in the Western Conference final versus in the first round is going to be a much more explosive series. And I get that. I think there's merits to both arguments. Anyways, Bettman was asked, and he seemed to have an emphatic not interested.
Despite the heavy majority of his fan base wanting the 1-8, for the exact reasons you laid out, the best teams will still play each other. It will just be later in the playoffs rather than the first round. Again, we come from a perfect level of experience on this because Detroit and Colorado aren't even in the same time zone, let alone the same division, but that was the best rivalry in hockey in the last, 50 years because they met each other in the second and third round every year. And even in the first round, then when a team like a Detroit, a Colorado, a favorite loses, it genuinely feels like an upset. Like it's a big deal. I don't care about either team, but I still remember when Edmonton took out Dallas that one year in the playoffs. That was like, holy hell. Now, if Dallas goes out in the first round, oh yeah, wow, that's crazy. Oh, who'd they play? Colorado? Yeah, okay.
Other team with 100 points.
Exactly. And I also, from the standpoint of a competitive balance, I understand this is an entertainment product, which is hilarious to me that Bettman doesn't listen to the fans who say this will entertain us more. But like I can't help but look at Dallas last year, who in a lot of people's minds were the cup favorite. They had to go through, what was it? Vegas, Colorado, and then they got bounced by Edmonton in the conference final. That is, I don't care who you are. You're not going to go 3 for 3 running through that gauntlet very often. And if you do, you're going to be wiped when you get to the finals. It's not a fair and balanced system to the teams that deserve it. We've also seen a lot of stinkers in the conference finals since this system went in, because you do have a team running through the gauntlet and then some team who, I'm not saying there's ever an easy series, but they don't get challenged a ton in the first 2 rounds of the playoffs, and then they get waxed by a super team in the conference final. Look at the Metro. That's been a fairly weak division for a while now. I don't know. I like it, the 1v8 from an entertainment standpoint, for all the reasons you laid out. I also just can't get over how many times the hockey fan base will scream something at Gary Bettman for years going, we want this. And he just goes, no.
Like international hockey?
Yeah.
Which was a glowing success. Maybe it might be one of the pivotal cornerstone moments of the NHL's growth over the next short term and long term.
Like that's a twofer, because that's going to kill the All-Star game too.
Yes. Huge
That's
win.
great for us too.
Everybody wins, including Gary Bettman. Because again, I boil it down to Gary Bettman runs an entertainment product. That is his job. That is what the NHL is. It's an entertainment product. And the people who are entertained by this give him ideas saying, this will entertain us more. And he just doesn't want to do it. I understand it's probably because owners don't want to pay for extra travel in the first round. But
is this a big boy league, or is this not?
Dude, complaints about travel, whether it's...
I'm not going to listen to it when expansion fees are $1 billion.
I agree.
I'm not going to listen.
Why is it a discount? They're talking about $2 billion now.
Yeah, I'm not interested in it all. That's their problem. This is what they signed up. Oh, I'm sorry.
Players.
You bought a team for $70 million. It's now worth $1 billion.
It's like your parents. Why don't you simply buy a rental property to rent out?
I had 3 when I was 20, and all I owned was pocket lint.
Why don't you guys go buy a cottage on a lake in the Muskokas, where all the NHL players also have cottages.
Yeah, exactly.
Simple as. I also think there's an element to this of the fans are always going to want change, but I can't disagree here. I want this too. And
fans have terrible ideas, but I think, when everyone is very much in agreement, it's like, maybe this is right.
And is it the end of the world? I don't think so. You want to know something that doesn't matter at all that bothers me, and I just have to be fully transparent? This is part of why I don't like it. If the wild card positioning causes you to cross over into the other teams, now divisional, the first 2 rounds are supposedly divisional rounds. Okay, if Detroit is the second wild card seed, who are they playing? Washington. They are now part of the Metro divisional playoffs. It doesn't matter. No one's hanging a banner for the second round. That's stupid.
No, I
hate that. That's stupid.
I want a banner in Detroit one day, Metro Division champions.
Imagine trying to explain that to a new fan. Were they ever in the Metro? No.
But they won it.
Yeah.
Hey, let's not forget, this is the league where there was a season where the Winnipeg Jets could have won the Southeast Division.
Look, man.
I think for me, the biggest, cause for lack of excitement with the current playoff format is how many years in the Atlantic did we know who the 2 and 3 seeds were going to play in the first round? It felt like every year was either going to be Toronto, Boston, or Toronto, Tampa. That doesn't make regular season games exciting.
And who would it be right now? Toronto, Tampa.
And again, It could work out that way for the majority of the years under 1-8, but I liked the variance. Players complaining about travel is one thing. I'll actually hear that. But again, it's almost the same argument to me as the owners. You're making a $250 billion. Get over it.
Especially because you've you're staying in the same time zone for the most part. Some of the teams are a lot more local, like Toronto to Florida. Yeah, that's a long flight. But you can stay there for multiple days, do 2 games at home like they do now, and then everybody travels back to the other for the next 2 sets of games. This is a multi-billion-dollar league. You need to act like it as well.
I will, again, everything relate back to the Red Wings. I won't hear the travel argument because the Red Wings won 4 Stanley Cups in our lifetime in the Western Conference.
From the West.
They won in those cup runs. They played Vancouver, Colorado, Dallas, Phoenix. Like, they were traveling. Like, and you can say, okay, well, they bought super teams for 3 of those cups. Sure. In the salary cap era, they won a Stanley Cup. And in that playoff run, they went to, what was it? Nashville, Colorado, Dallas to get to the finals. You're big boys. You can handle travel.
And if you're playing teams out of division, it allows the fans to have more exposure to those other teams. It's like, we know what the Toronto Maple Leafs are. We know what the Tampas are. Maybe we don't know as much about Carolina or about New Jersey. Like, we don't see a lot of their games. They don't play in our division. We only play them a few times a year. Like, this creates a lot of cross-pollinization and can create rivalries organically. We're all arguing the same point. It's just, it's crazy how emphatic he was against doing that.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys watched Community, but I think Britta was doing like an oil protest and someone came up to her and was like, no one's on the other side of this argument. What are you yelling at?
That's a great point.
That's us right now. To get away from, I will hear the argument against, and if you want to leave a comment about why you like the divisional system better, for the sake of moving on to other things that were mentioned, what do you think about the, pushback on potentially lengthening 3-on-3 overtime before you get to a shootout? Because that I actually do give some credence to the pushback, which is you don't want more wear and tear in a long season, and you don't want those kinds of injuries and things. What are your overall thoughts on that?
Evan, do you want to say the line or do you want me to say it?
I don't know what the line is, so
is this a big boy league or not?
Yeah, but 3-on-3 is not the same though.
No, okay. Lengthen your bench. Have depth on your team. Like 100%. You don't. You look at the Red Wings, they only play 6 forwards in overtime now because it's only 5 minutes. Okay, well, that's an advantage to teams with depth. It's a competitive advantage, just like every other thing that goes into the game of hockey. You have your strengths, you have your weaknesses. You don't have a deep enough bench to roll 4 or 5 pairs or trios of players in 3-on-3. Cool. Win in regulation or have a different team building approach. It's competitive advantages and disadvantages. Every fan on the face of the earth, we would like longer overtime. The players, I don't know, we get pretty tired. Piss off. Like, you're getting paid millions of dollars. You can survive an extra 5 minutes.
Even a minute or 2. Whatever would meaningfully reduce the amount of shootouts, I think would be great. I do agree. You have to end the games at some point. It's a regular season. It's too long already.
Yeah, no 5-on-5 overtime in the regular season. No go. Like, 10 minutes is my absolute max. I agree with that. But 3-on-3, 10 minutes. How many would actually make it to the 10 minutes?
Get me some Tarasenko.
Oh my God.
Petrie Hall out there just to see.
It ain't making it. To see. That game ain't making it to 10 minutes. I'll tell you that.
Brandon Montour's record to score.
How did they score directly off the faceoff?
And we're talking about, the Red Wings scoring, of course.
Yes.
Yeah, because Tarasenko won it back to Hall, who just panicked and dumped it in. It hit the stanchion and went in the net.
That's right. Just like we drew it up. And then how funny is this whole, we're just going to get back to the same draft system we had before. Like, teams wanted the decentralized draft. Here's the thing. Teams wanted a decentralized draft, not because they didn't all like being in the same room. There were some complaints about, everyone's on the draft floor and you can hear other conversations, but that's been the business for years and years and years. They were complaining because the tight turnaround from NHL hockey, Stanley Cup finals to the draft to free agency deadline. And the NHL solution was to decentralize the draft rather than change the schedule of all that stuff and give some more time. And I get there's bigger factors in play that you can't just easily make the season end sooner or free agency start later. I get that. And now they're going back away where Bettman's telling teams, like, you wanted this and now you're complaining about it. So they're going to go back to a limited version where like the top 50 picks or so are going to be in person. It's all headed towards the draft going back to what it was. Everyone in person again. My thing is the same complaints are going to keep coming up. Spread it out. And we shouldn't be handing out the cup in late June. Like first week of June latest, in my mind, figure out whatever the hell you have to do for that and make it so you have time between the draft, the cup hockey, the draft, and free agency. Because they shouldn't have to fly home on a red eye to get 6 hours together before they have to sign guys.
How the draft is done is immaterial to me. It's if they want to be there or not, doesn't matter to me. How it projects as an entertainment product is what matters. Make the draft exciting, make it engaging, make it an event where, like, look at the NFL. When a city finds out the draft's going there, you can't go there inexpensively. It becomes like just a mecca of football for that period of time. The NHL should strive to do something like that. And I will not profess to be an expert of the NFL draft, but
I made a Laramie Tunsil comment last episode. And you didn't even understand what I said.
No, I still don't. But if they're going to pick an avenue on what they're doing with this, they need to build out the entertainment aspect of it as well. Make it an event that people want to go to.
Wait, does Matthew Schaefer have a gas mask?
He's a teenage boy from Ontario. Of course he does.
That's right, yeah.
No, there's a lot to unpack here. One, for as much as I rip on Bettman, like I got to give the guy credit for like standing his ground on this one, saying, this wasn't me, guys. You wanted this. I listened. For once in my life, I listened. And now you're already giving me crap about it. Like, I like that attitude about it from him. I don't like the idea of the decentralized draft. I think if it's done properly like the NFL, it could be awesome. I have zero faith in the NHL to do that. But if they do, it's great. Like this Sphere last year was a neat concept, and that was a home run. I think it's ridiculous we're having this conversation before we see what it looks like. Like they're committed to it. It's happening this year. Okay, yep. Let's see it. Let's see how everybody likes it. Was that logistically easier for you? Did everybody enjoy it? Did the fans enjoy it? And if the answer is a resounding no, okay, then yeah, let's have the talk about switching it back. If the answer goes, that actually kind of kicked ass, okay, well then you're not committed to going back to the old way if the new way works better. I agree with you. There's an easy solution to all the problems on this one. Cut down the preseason, start the season earlier, end the season earlier. Every one of these, that's all wins for everybody involved. But whatever. If this is the option, I'm curious at the least to see how this goes.
And the NHL has shown a willingness to like change things as they discover what's working, what doesn't.
Sometimes
ignoring all the years of clamoring for international hockey before. First off, the Four Nations was a surprising success. And secondly, the NHL is embracing this and
surprising to whom?
The Four Nations was a success.
Who was surprised by that?
I mean,
a lot of people. Me.
We were. That the fact that it was only Four Nations and it was that intense.
Well, ticket sales leading up to it were a testament to that. It was a surprise. The NHL was genuinely worried nobody was going to give a crap at one point because
not everyone's an all-knowing oracle.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. It's rude that you keep your secrets too, so you can look smug later.
That's right.
Everyone's like, "Why is Evan's face like that?" And I used to tell them, that's actually a YouTube comment that we get a lot. Is why is Evan's face like that? And my answer before was,
I'm disassociating most of the time.
That's just what his face looks like. But now he's just permanently smug because he knows better than everyone. But the NHL again has shown a willingness to adjust. So if this works great, or they find a way that works, the wheels have changed. They certainly don't turn fast, but they're less slow than they were. Okay, we're going to take another quick break, and when we're back, the final segment here on the Winged Wheel Podcast. Back after this.
We're going to overtime.
Overtime is brought to you by our Patreon supporters, patreon.com/Winged Wheel Podcast. Again, if you support the show, you get access to benefits like our bonus overtime episodes, which record right after these main ones. We let loose, have fun. You get bloopers, you get questions that weren't answered on the main show. Thoughts with Evan, our current thing, which most of these questions today are about, are, does Evan know about this very popular pop culture thing that everyone in the world knows about, or is he not programmed properly because he's an alien not of this world? So people are enjoying that one.
There's only one so far, right? That I didn't know.
Yeah,
that's what spawned all this.
None of us knew the one.
Yeah, it was a big one. If you're a patron, go back and listen to that Patreon exclusive. You also get access to our Patreon exclusive Winged Wheel Podcast Discord, and you're automatically entered into all of our giveaways. we give away 2 tickets to every Detroit Red Wings home game, going directly, again, to our Patreon supporters. So again, patreon.com/wingedwheel podcast. Let's start with questions. Give Simon the Heart says, with the number of forward prospects on their way to the Wings, does Berggren have a long-term future with this team?
Yes, but he has to show more than he has. Now, again, he's very young in his career. There's time for progression, but an undersized forward on the third line, not even putting up a half a point per game, it's hard to envision that role on a cup contending team. I think he has it in him to be a 40, 50 point player, but he has to get there in order for a long-term role to be a thing.
Yeah, guaranteeing long-term for a depth player is just, it's very rare where you can project that out, and he certainly isn't checking the boxes that say, yeah, this guy's going to be a Red Wing for the next 10 years, you know? Arrowwolf91 says, is Lagesson really so poor he can't get any time in the third pairing over these two? Was there some amputation I'm not aware of holding him in the press box? It's not. He's of the same quality, really.
I think if he could play the right side, which I don't know if he can or can't or is bad at, but yeah, because at least hate on Gustafsson all you want, he's running the second power play right now, so they're not pulling him out of the lineup. If there was a path, and I know Lagesson shoots left, but if there was a path for him to take Hall's spot on the right side, we'd have seen it by now.
Yeah, if you can do that at the NHL level, they would have likely have explored that. Schmelt says, how do you feel about McLellan saying publicly that the team basically feels more comfortable in front of Mrazek? What kind of effect will that have on Talbot or even Lyon if he even gets another sniff? Would it kill their confidence or fire them up to help us go on a 14-game heater to finish the season? I mean, to me, that's more like anyone on the team will tell you that the goaltending was failing them for months there. So that is more, you're less worried about the long-term effects and you're doing what you can when every point matters for a playoff race. So it's not nothing for sure. The other goalies wouldn't like that, but they're not, you know, this isn't Igor Shesterkin with a long-term big money contract. These guys they know they were playing poorly and they're not here signed forever. And so if they want to change that narrative, it's on them to change it. Do they like it? Probably not, but I mean, we all have eyes. We saw what we saw. Matt says, who would you like to see Steve try to offer in a hypothetical where you could offer sheet these guys or trade for them? Gabe Vilardi, Matthew Knies, or JJ Peterka? That's an
I think that's
one.
the order I want, but the opposite direction. So Peterka, Knies,
Vilardi. I mean, I'd be happy with any of them right now.
I think I would go. Oh God, there's no bad options here.
No.
Vilardi, Peterka, Knies.
Vilardi would check a box where, like, I really wanted Gabe Vilardi in that draft. Like, I really wanted Gabe Vilardi.
Seeing what he's doing and Marty Necas is doing kills me inside. Yeah, but I digress.
Because that's the one where I was
Suzuki.
I was a Vilardi guy. You were a Necas guy.
I'm still so mad about that draft.
The size draft. Thank you for that, Tyler. But is Peterka third there?
I have him ahead of Knies, but again, it's 1A, 1B, 1C. I could be talked in any direction.
Evan, you said Peterka, Knies, Vilardi?
Yeah, it's all very similar.
Stay Fresh Cheesebags, amongst a bigger comment, he says, I hate when national media trashes the Yzer plan because of the stopgap veteran free agents. Idiots look at the stable of prospects in the upcoming cap space. That's the Yzer plan. The other part of it, the yikes part of it, though, is Yzerman needs more plan A guys to sign. Hall can be sent down. Gus could be traded. Maybe Tarasenko agrees to dissolve his contract. The rest just have to wait it out. Also, by the way, could you break down the Jake Wallman situation just one more time? Hey, Joseph, when I see you, I'm punching you. But yeah, I mean, that's the gist of it, right? Like what I said at the top of the show, the boring answer is probably somewhere in the middle here. Things could have gone better, but at the same time, the whole plan wasn't these years.
I don't even think there's much room for debate. If you're separating it into categories rather than just looking at the whole Yzer plan as one thing, he's done a tremendous job drafting and developing. Everything from the amateur side, bringing them up to the NHL level has been nothing short of great. But the opposite is true for the pro scouting, the trades, and the free agent signings. Yeah, there have been some good moves in there, but like even some of the players that are useful are massively overpaid. So it's both things can be true, and you can base your overall opinion on which of those you prioritize and what's more important to you. So I think drafting and developing is the most important part, obviously, in a rebuild. So I can look and say, I like the job Yzerman's done overall, despite the fact that I am probably more critical of his trades and free agency than anybody, because to me, they've been, by and large, an overwhelming failure.
All right, last one here from Lennon Vandersand says, who do you guys see in free agency to help this soft as hell net front defense? I get Simon, Johansson are basically rookies, but game after game, the net front defense just shows how atrocious it is. With ASB coming over, maybe that'll definitely help the offensive side of defense, but realistically, who would help this team defensively?
Because that's the thing. It's like you can solve certain issues with not prototypical models of a player. Like, do you bring in a Fabro, a David Savard, a Yoki Haru on short-term contracts? Are they upgrades on what they have now? Yeah. Are they going to be fix-alls? Absolutely not. And I don't know who the defenseman that would be a fix-all is that's available.
Well, aren't we 1 year removed from the Radko Gudas sweepstakes?
Is there how much is Jacob Chychrun going to get paid this offseason?
More than the Red Wings can probably afford to pay him.
I mean, they can afford a lot.
They could have just drafted him.
Is he getting an 8x8 or more?
It's going to be close to that.
With the cap going up, I'd have to look at the numbers more closely, but I feel like there's going to be a bidding war for him.
No, I agree fully.
I would be shocked if it's not more than that. But again, we're not at that point where we're necessarily looking at free agents yet. I think we're all still reeling that the Rantanen name is off the board.
And again, where are the Red Wings going to allocate future dollars and current dollars? Because Edvinsson's cheap now. He will not be cheap on his next contract. And can you afford 3 near $10 million defensemen?
Neil Pionk's a free agent.
That actually is intriguing.
Offseason. Yeah,
that's intriguing. Because then he can play opposite Edvinsson. Johansson now goes down to the bottom pair, which makes that not a disaster.
Yeah.
Detroit is kind of like Florida when you've been playing in Winnipeg that long.
The peg. All right. We're going to wrap up this episode of the Wind Wheel Podcast. Thank you all so very much for tuning in. We're going to be back with you on Sunday. Again, there's the Vegas game between now and then. See what the vibes are like. We appreciate everyone for tuning into this episode. We appreciate the sponsors of the Wind Wheel Podcast. To all of our Patreon supporters, we could not do this show without you. Patreon.com/wingedwheelpodcast if you want to support the show. And if you want to support us, but Patreon's not for you, subscribe wherever you're getting this podcast, watching on YouTube, listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever. Leave a rating, leave a review, tell a friend about the show. All that helps a ton. And to all of our name level supporters, we could not thank you enough. Arjun Shankar, Ian Bartels on behalf of the Sarah Grand Foundation, Akefer, THL Champ, Samuel Soderholm, Icon, Glenn Brabham, Matthew M. Rice, Sea Lion, Adam Rose, Adam Zuiza, Admiral Matt S. of the Cheesebag Navy, Alex Toger, Anna Sleeman, Asher Killian, Beer League Legend, Best James Bond, Bingo Bango, Carl Brutina Nanaluski, CB55, Citizen High Five, Clip Clop Nene, Connor Scovey, Craig Kibble, Denny's Gamer Girl, Derek Enstam, DJ Denton, Eric Hill, Give Blood Fight Probert, Goose Looney's Drinking Club, Grand Rapids Girly, Griffin God Creatives, Hatrick Sandine Pelika, Hockeytown Love, Hockeytown Matt, Hassam Al-Qassem, Jay Gollum, Jacob Turner, James McLean, aka Jambo, Jeff Pridemore, Jennifer Morris, John Ingalls, Jonathan Miller, Kaylin Wood, Lunchbox, Matt Keeler, Marty, Mark Hernandez, Matt McKay, Michael Edlin, Mr. Kuzi. Now I have to learn how to click on a Macintosh, Podgy713, R.A., Richard Perkins, Roy Donk, Ryan Britt, Sam Bankson, Skeletor, Slim Smitty Cards, Stephen Ortlieb. That's what I appreciate about you. The Crusty Nuisance, Wellman's Elite Dancing D, Wings Fan in Chicago, Iser Plan Stan, Aaron Hudson, General Andy Bohan of the Cheesebag Army, A.A. Ron, Albert Johansson, All Motor No Hands, and Stanislavski, Another Future Consideration, Baked Starfish, Bellingham Acid Balls, Bex, C.E. Hayes, Chris Flinsky, Commander Ben Barron of the Cheesebag Space Force, Connor Layton and Corey Prida, Darren Fick, Drop the Puck, Dylan Larkin, Trade Sacrifice, Eric Nance, Evan Beckner, Evans Ham Radio, Frank Stanley's Cup, Gene Sullivan, Grepsky, Griffey Boy, James Pridemore, Johnny Page, Jeremiah Dobo, Jim, JM Rhapsody, Josh Yelton, Chaotic Monkey, Kevin McCracken, Quaz, Larkin's Loyal Lemming, Linda Hull, listening to Ryan Hanna while using an imported Japanese bidet, Lonnie Zone, Lucas Raymond, Mitch Minier, Nerno Needs a Hug, Noted, Soderblom Worshiper, Joey Jojo Shabadoo, Ophelia, As Good As It Gets, Roy Mudbutt, Ryan M, Sam Mix, Sandy P, Right Hand D, Steven, That Other Guy, The Hodag, The Hat 123, Trent Thorough, Wings Fan in St. Louis, Scott, and your second favorite patron. Thank you all so very much. Time to learn more about Evan's pop culture knowledge.
Thanks for tuning in to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Be sure to visit wingedwheelpodcast.com, where you'll find links to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll also find ways to support the show, like Patreon, official podcast merchandise, and more. And don't forget to follow us on X at Winged Wheel Pod, at Ryan Hanna, WWP, at Brad Crisco, and at Hockeytown Evan, as well as Winged Wheel Podcast on Instagram.